What is your favorite or maybe a weird, fun ritual that you do when you're out there trekking or adventuring?
Wow, that's a good one. For me, I love the sunrise and sunset. So I like to, if I can, if I'm out there in wilderness, to really just take a moment and pause. If the sun's coming up or sun's coming down, just even if it's just a breath, to go, here I am. Yeah, I love that.
And do you trek in silence or do you have a little soundtrack going on?
I mostly don't listen to music or anything when I'm out there. More or less, I'm alone in my thoughts, which sounds crazy, particularly when you're going across somewhere like in Antarctica or something like that. But I find that I don't know, I feel like I lose touch with the environment if I'm listening to too much music or something like that.
Wow, that's so cool. You're very present.
Yeah.
What do you think about most? And this could be, whether you're out there trekking or just in your everyday life. I'm just curious, what's that story? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, of course, as someone who likes to stay present, I do try to stay in the moment, but I am guilty of my mind trailing off in a million other directions from time to time, without a doubt. But I'd say my happiest moments is when I can really get lost in that present moment. So when we find those moments of flow, when my mind is really there and locked in, and I can keep moving forward, just when a minute turns into an hour turns into a day. But the opposite is true sometimes. I feel like time is relative in my thoughts, where sometimes a minute of hardship feels like an hour, the other way around, and that's when my mind is running and racing in a million directions. So a little bit of everything, man.
Nice. Okay, cool. Is there like a one subject or two that you're thinking about most?
Just in my daily life, I think for me, I definitely am always thinking about, pushing my limits. How can I be better and stronger and fitter and a better person? So I think, like I said, I would fall into a bucket of personal development in some capacity, not only for myself, but for others. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Awesome. I definitely want to ask you more about that, because that's a big part of the show, about being real about everything in our lives and the world that we want to live in, and having the ability to actually implement that. So I love that that's something that you stand for and are constantly thinking about, because I think most people think it would be nice, but maybe aren't actually doing it or don't know kind of how to get started. I think everyone who's listening to this, part of the reason they listen to it is because of the inspiration. But I think in general, the idea of being a better human, everyone will agree with, but there might not be the payoff, like making more money or, having a sexier body, a lot of the things that people like are the greatest motives to do something versus being a better human being.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's been fun for me is there's a little bit of a tangent, but reframing my mind a little bit around creativity. So I don't think of myself, I haven't, at least the story that I've been telling myself. And again, I believe that we are the story we tell ourselves. So
that's good.
I have told myself for many years, you're not creative. And because the word creative in my mind has meant fine art. So like, I'm really bad at drawing. My handwriting's horrific. Like, it's just, that's not like my skill set, unfortunately. I wish I could do those things better. But what I've realized recently, it's actually, there's something actually about being at Burning Man that really illuminated this for me, my first burn this year. I know you were there. But was realizing, kind of reframing the word creativity in my mind, because what I realize is to go to the first question, what I think a lot about is I think about how to live my life creatively, how to embrace health and fulfillment and happiness and not get stuck in some of the really easy to get stuck in social traps that we all find ourselves in from time to time, me being no different than that. But I definitely am kind of constantly checking in with myself. And I'm really recently starting to use this word more to describe myself, is to think about how to live life creatively and fulfilled.
Love that. And I actually had a very similar narrative for a very, very long time, because I'm like, I'm not really a musician. You don't want to see my paintings or visual fine art. I'm definitely not skilled at that. And to me, that's such a limiting belief, because we're creating our lives. Exactly. And that is creativity. Every decision we make, every idea that we have is creativity. And when I allow myself to believe that, then I'm like, wow, I'm a very creative person all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah. That's been an interesting reframing of sort of my own personal story in my own head that I've been thinking a lot about recently.
Awesome. Excellent advice. And since we're on the topic of advice, what's some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Wow, that's a great question. Some of the best advice I've ever received, I would say, and I definitely will go deeper on this at some point, but be, for my mother around really, she jokes now, she says, careful what you wish for when you tell your kid they can do anything that they dream of. Because I've dreamed up some pretty crazy things that, when you're a mother and your kid wants to go climb Mount Everest or do some of the things I've done, obviously she's sitting on the edge of her seat, hoping for my health and wellness more than anything, and safety. But that advice over time, really to dream big, to be aspirational, and to be free to fail. Because I think allowing yourself to dream and try for things also implicitly means that you're probably not going to, if you're creative enough or audacious enough in your goal setting, you're probably not going to hit it out of the park every single time. But being okay with that. So I think the coupling of dream big advice that my mother's given me, as well as the sort of the learning from some of those processes, have been really valuable over time.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom with us. Next question for you. What was like the last really minor thing that you were afraid of? I know you adventure the world, and we'll get more into that in a second, what that looks like. But I'm just really curious, like on the other side of this spectrum, like what's something kind of funny, like the last thing you were afraid of that you might find to be a little ridiculous?
Last thing I was afraid of. Yeah. Fear is a funny one for sure. God, I'm trying to think of something really specific that I was afraid of in the last couple of weeks. I think that fear of failure is just such a common fear, but it's something that we all deal with in any sort of capacity. So I don't know. I do a lot of public speaking, and I think that I consistently do it quite well. But every single time, right before I go on stage, so I gave 2 speeches this week, one in Spokane, Washington, and another at Google this week, both that I'm happy to report went great.
Great, nice.
But every single time, without a fail, I mean, I speak very frequently. There's that 1 minute before going on stage going like, what if they don't like me? Like, right. What if I bomb? What is that like? And it's funny, particularly something that's not a new experience for me. Yeah. Like standing in front of a stage in front of thousands of people, whatever, is something I love to do and I'm confident about. But there's still that I don't know what it's that it's like being the new kid at the cafeteria in school or something. It's like, what if I don't sit in the right place? You know what I mean? It's just funny I have that self-awareness of myself that every single time there's still just that slight moment of as much confidence as I exude in those environments. Kind of like, what if I don't know? But then you get in the flow of it and everything goes great. But that's something even just this week, and something I do very regularly. It's just a little bit of fear.
That's amazing. I definitely want to ask you later in the interview about how your relationship with fear and how to persevere through it. But it's really funny to me because here you are doing these, life, where it could be life or death if there's an avalanche on on Everest, and then public speaking gives you fear as well. That might make you feel the same way that you're feeling when your life is on the line.
Yeah, so, it's funny. I mean, I
these
think
minds that we have.
These minds that we have, exactly. And fear is a funny thing too, right? Because I think that there's a perception, because I have conquered a lot of my fears, that I don't have fear, and that couldn't be further than the truth. But it's actually understanding fear, having a self-awareness around that fear, and being able to persevere through that. But that's different than not having fear. It's like you're on the side of a mountain, you're up in Mount Everest, or I've been at other places where you're looking down, there's 5,000 foot drop off. If you slip and fall, you're gonna die. If you're not a little bit scared in that moment, then there's something wrong with you. It's not that you're so badass and cool. It's there's a healthy fear of this. And so that plays into, every single's life. I, of course, would give the advice to not let fear hold you back, and to push through those fears and understand how to analyze risk, and to walk out on that proverbial stage, whatever that is. But yeah, we all have these little nervous anxiety things. That's part of life, I think, and learning how to deal with that.
What is your biggest fear? Or what are you most afraid of? Let's go with that.
What am I most afraid of? I think my biggest fear, and I work very hard in my life to not have this happen, but my biggest fear would be to be stuck in a life that I'm not fulfilled by or not happy with. And so I have made some significant turns in my life that would have seemed to step away from the quote unquote more obvious or successful path. Quitting my Wall Street job to go race triathlon was certainly a path that was fulfilling for me and I never regret, but it certainly was a less lucrative career path in the short run of my 20s. But my bigger fear is to be, in a life day to day that I'm not passionate about. And so I think that I try to, sometimes I'm not successful, but generally I think I'm been successful in sort of patterning a life that I am fulfilled and excited about, and continue to pursue my passions. Because for me, we only got one shot at this life, at least in my belief system. And so yeah, I'm afraid of not using every single second and energy to make it the best.
That's so incredibly inspiring. I've been sharing this a lot in different posts that I make and on the show, but the top 5 regrets of the dying, Bronnie Ware's memoir, which essentially, if you were to drill all the top 5 things into one, it's not living an authentic life.
Yeah.
It's not going after your hopes and dreams and living a life that others expect of you. It's spending too much time working, not allowing yourself to be happier, spending your time with the people that you love around you. So that's so cool that is your biggest fear, because that keeps you living right in alignment with what really is true for you. And clearly, if that's the most common regret people have on their deathbeds,
sure,
that's a struggle that a lot of people have.
Absolutely. And I think it's you can talk about fear is something the general topic that I'm fascinated by. We can spend the whole podcast on it if you want. Yeah. But it's interesting to think about fear just even from the couple different angles we're talking about it right now. It's like you think about fear in such a negative, but also the way you formulated that question is asking me, how does fear almost motivate me in my life? Or in that sense, it's like, I'm afraid of having regret in my life. Yeah. Therefore, I try to live a life where I don't have regret. So in that sense, that quote unquote fear, if harnessed in the proper way, is actually can be a motivator rather than a detractor.
That's a beautiful reframing. This is a question for you because, I mean, you're incredible. You're the world record holder in the Explorers Club, which we'll talk more about in a second. But you literally hiked up, 7 different peaks in 131 days. Yeah. Right. That's absolutely extraordinary. So clearly when you turn it on, you have some serious endurance. So my question is actually the opposite of that, is what do you do for rest? What does that look like for you?
As much as I believe in hard work and putting it out there and putting crazy long days into your passion 7 days a week, I've been there. That's a lot of my most creative, successful, quote unquote, successful piece of my life. But there has to be a balance to that. There has to be a moment when you go maybe if I took a day or 2 off from this right now, I would the same way that muscles regenerate and get stronger when we're resting. Yeah. The mind is no different than that. And so I think that is hugely important as well, is finding those moments, those inflection points, those moments to breathe where, a little bit of free wandering in your mind, you might actually bring out, you might be more productive in 80 hours than you were in 120 with a little bit of rest. I don't know.
What is your intention these days if you had to drill it down to 1 word or 2 words?
My daily intention for myself or for others or both?
For yourself.
Finding calm and contentment. And I think that is funny because I think when we think of calm and contentment, we think of somebody sitting quietly on a meditation mat, which I'm an avid meditator and it's a big part of my life and my mental training in that. So I'm a big believer in that. But, I also being self-aware and that intention around what are really, and it actually goes back to your previous question around community. What are the things that make me happy? Who are the people that make me happy? What are those environments? How do I sort of create those environments and bring about more of that in my life? So being very intentional about my time and where I'm spending my energy to drive that sort of higher level of contentment or happiness is certainly a daily thought for me at the moment.
And the last question of this part of the interview, since
these are great questions, by the way. These I'm not trying to answer them best I can, but these are insightful, deep, rapid fire questions. It's not what's your favorite color? What's your this is getting to the meat. I love it right away.
That's where I love to go with people. To really allow people to express and paint the picture of who they are. And I know you do so many interviews and
this is great, man.
And stuff. The last thing I want to do is to do the same talk that you've given a million times before.
Yeah. Well, I'm loving it. This is all fresh material, man. This is great.
So, welcome to the show, the one and only Colin O'Brady.
There it is,
dude. It's so inspiring how you are carving your own path.
Thank you.
It seriously is. The easy thing to do is to do what everybody else is doing. and to play by everybody else's rules. And you're truly an inspiration that you're playing your life your way. You're living in alignment with your truth. And your biggest fear is not doing that, which is really, really, really inspiring. And I know that, for me personally, that's a really important message for me to hear, and I'm sure for everyone listening as well. So welcome to the show. Everyone listening, you probably are teased a little bit as to some of Colin's greatest accomplishments and, what he does. But I mean, so inspiring. You shared that you almost died and then you rehabilitated yourself. I'd love to have you dive deeper into that in a few minutes here. And then just having the courage to leave your corporate job and, pursue your dream, and not only to do that, but like to really make a big impact in the lives of kids as well, which is, I know, a cause that is really important to you. So you're a pro endurance athlete, you're a TEDx speaker, an adventurer, a 2-time world record holder.
You're making me blush.
Anything major that I missed out there?
I think that's a great recap. Yeah, that's everything. Maybe not everything, but a lot of it. So that's great. We can go from there.
So sweet. So I'm so inspired, and what I love to do with my guests is to dive in and perhaps start out at a point in your life where things were looking a little bit murky. Maybe it was a moment where you didn't know where your authentic truth was, or you were out there kind of in the dark experimenting. I'd love to have you take us kind of to like a vulnerable moment, and to hear just paint the picture of that moment, and what it looked like, what you were telling yourself, and then what the big turnaround for you was.
Yeah, so I'll back into it. I think about 11 years ago, I had just graduated from college and didn't have a ton of money, but I'd been painting houses in the summer, so I had a backpack and a surfboard, and decided to set off in the world for a bit of an adventure, to see a little bit of a world before I thought would settling into a job in finance industry career in some capacity. And it was an amazing experience. Hitchhiked through New Zealand for a couple of months, surfed through Australia, had amazing times in places like Fiji and Southeast Asia. And then before I knew it, I'll describe the details better, but I woke up in a rural Thai hospital with my body bandaged from the waist down, with a cat running around my bed and across my chest, having just come out of an ICU. That paints the picture for you. But I had been severely burned in a fire in rural Thailand on a small beach there. And I had been being a foolish and precocious 22-year-old. For those of you who've been to Southeast Asia, you know that fire dancing and things like that are fairly common over there. But I, of course, was not enough for me to just watch that. I tried to participate, and found myself jumping a flaming jump rope, which wrapped around my legs, lit my body completely on fire to my neck. And I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which most certainly saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, primarily my legs and feet. And like I said, I was in a one-room shack, actually literally driven down their ambulance was a moped, and my legs around the driver's waist, my burnt legs around the driver's waist, driving down a bumpy dirt path to a one-room shack, which was their quote-unquote hospital. And it was, a vulnerable and tragic, and one of certainly the most hardest and scary moments of my life. And the doctors through that entire process, which we can talk about a little bit more, but were telling me, hey, most likely you'll never walk again normally, because the burns were so severe over my knees and ankle joints and ligaments and everything. And a terrible diagnosis, and scary for no matter who you are. But 22-year-old person, my 22-year-old self, who'd been a lifelong athlete, had somewhat taken for granted being able to move my body and express myself in that way, in an instant being told, hey, your life's never going to be the same, you're never going to walk again normally. And in a lot of ways, to be lucky to make it out of this Thai hospital. Oftentimes people die from infection from burns, because of course your skin is protecting you from all that. And when you're in a hospital bed where there's a cat running around your room, and in a third world country with very limited medical supplies, in the rural part that I was in, really stepped up the gravity of the situation, even beyond what it would have been horrible had you been in a more sanitary environment.
What were you telling yourself in that moment?
If I'm completely candid with you, what I was telling myself is my life is over. Like, maybe not dead, but that life as I know it is over. I'm screwed. What am I going to be? My entire self-worth was devalued in an instant. Like I said, I really had thought of myself as an athlete. I swam at Yale. I was a state champion soccer player and swimmer as a kid. That was just kind of my big identity, was movement in a lot of ways. And so like I said, I don't mean to belittle that this diagnosis would be horrible for any person, obviously. But so much of who I was this person who excels in sports. And so to be kind of really ripped that away, I was like, who am I? Literally asking myself that question. Who am I now if I'm not somebody who can be able-bodied? And it was terrible moment for me. And the physical and emotional pain were significant, not to be undervalued. The emotional pain, as I described, of kind of feeling like my entire identity was ripped away from me in an instant, but also the physical pain. I mean, when you're burned on 25 or more percentage of your body, I mean, imagine, I still to this day, of course, touch a hot pan from time to time and burn a tiny bit of my finger. I'm like, that hurts, man, but over the course of your entire body, it just throws you around so much. And they were giving me morphine, and of course, but at least the reaction my body had to that was, it felt like there was insects crawling all over my body when they gave me morphine. It was just this horrible other feeling. And so just the actual sensations on my body were just so extreme and horrible, combined with this emotional downward spiral that I was undergoing, being on the other side of the world, not speaking the language, not understanding the culture. Like, it was just frightening in all aspects.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And that sounds absolutely terrifying. So here you are in, this hospital, and your whole life has changed, and, doctors said that you wouldn't be able to walk again, or thought you wouldn't be able to walk again. So I'm curious to hear what that turnaround process was for you. Cause like, you found yourself in that, like that dark, bottom moment where your whole identity was like kind of ripped away from you in that moment. So like, what happened next?
Well, to me, I'm not a religious person, but the angel in this story is my mother, really. She arrived to my hospital room, and I mentioned her a little bit in the opening remarks of what's the best advice you've ever been given. Mm-hmm. But, she came in, and I know now, because we've relived some of this trauma together, how scared she was, how afraid she was, how she actually spent hours and hours and hours in the hallways of this Thai hospital pleading with the doctors, crying, calling home. But she literally never one time showed me that side of her fear in this. She somehow summoned the courage and strength to walk into my hospital room every single day with a smile on her face, an air of positivity, literally asking me things like, all right, Colin, I know this is bad, but what do you want to do when you get out of here? Let's think about the future. Let's set a measurable goal. Let's dream. And I literally looked at her, and I expressed the things that I just said, which I was like, what are you talking about, Mom? Like, I'm screwed. Like, stop trying to like make this better. Like, there's no silver lining in this. And she was just like, nope, like, this is not permanent. Like, life's going to test you with setbacks. This is a huge one. But it's become one of my mantras through meditation or whatever, which is that this too will change, or this too will pass, which I'm sure we're all somewhat familiar with that concept. But really just kind of hammered home that for me. And so finally, about 3 or 4 days, and I was like, I don't even know if I was just like I was like, fine, I'll just say a goal. Like, I'll placate her. I'll play along with this silly game that she wants me to play. And I said, great. Well, then I'm going to one day race a triathlon. Which is not something I'd ever done before. And looking down at my legs seemed pretty much very unrealistic. But she didn't tell me, oh, maybe you should set a more realistic goal. She didn't take it there. She just looked at me. And I just remember this moment so vividly. I'm sitting in my hospital bed. She's sitting in the chair right next to me, actually sitting on the edge of my bed. And she says, great. You're going to race a triathlon one day, and just wraps me in her arms, gives me a hug, and then sits down, pulls out her computer. We had, at this point, I'd been life flighted to Bangkok after 8 days. So I was a little bit more stable, in terms of the severity of the hospital. So I did get to a slightly better hospital, about 8 days in this ordeal. And she pulls out her computer. She goes, great. Sounds like we should learn about triathlon today, and starts reading me everything about it. Where are the races? How far are they? What does it take? How do people train for these things? Literally just like Googling triathlon races, whatever it was. And then we just started this daily dialogue, and that just sunk in for me. So for the next 18 months, I was 3 months that I was, didn't walk at all. I was flown back to the United States finally, still hadn't taken a single step. I was in a wheelchair when I got home. And my mom and I just had this daily dialogue about this, like, some triathlon somewhere down the road in my future. And there was a very pivotal moment. I mentioned it in my TEDx talk. But I awake in my mother's kitchen, and she says to me, "Great. So we've been talking about triathlon for the last 3 months in this hospital, and that's an amazing goal. But now today your goal is to take your first step." So to me, this is the most, even more valuable piece of her wisdom, which was she inspired me to set the audacious, huge goal. And then she said, "Great. Now we need to talk about the incremental goals." And so for me, she brought that back in. So
good. Your mom's an angel.
My mom's
amazing.
incredible. She's incredible. Shout out to Eileen Brady. But she said, she literally, and it made it really obvious, she took a chair, an actual literal chair from our kitchen table, placed it one step in front of my wheelchair and said, "Today your goal is to figure out how to somehow get yourself out of this wheelchair and step into that one chair in front of you." It took me hours that day to even think it was possible, and the pain I was still in with my legs and everything, but I got up somehow to my wheelchair, and a few hours later she comes back and I'm sitting in the other chair, and I said, "I did it." She said, "Amazing, you accomplished your goal today." And the next day she woke up and then she moved the chair 5 steps away from my wheelchair. Okay, great. Now today's is to go a little bit further. And, a week later I could walk across the kitchen. 3 weeks later I could go from the couch in the living room to the dinner table in the kitchen for dinner. And that was a big celebration. And it literally went on like that till I could sort of walk and then kind of stumble and then actually jog one day. And to wrap up this piece of the story, is the kind of the biggest redemption was 18 months after my accident. I had finally moved to Chicago to take a job trading commodities, sort of kind of trying to get my life back on track and the path that I thought I was headed. So I took a job there. And I was like, great, Chicago has the largest triathlon in the United States in terms of participation numbers. Like, what better place for me to be living? I should honor this goal that I had set myself. And so I signed up to race the Chicago Triathlon, joined a local gym near my work, started going there after work for several months over the course of that summer. This is summer of 2009. I was born in 2008, almost 10 years ago now. And didn't know anything about triathlon still. I mean, I read, but I'd go to the gym, like meeting guys like, "Hey, do you do triathlons?" I like see a guy with a bike and ask him questions about, what to do in these races and whatever. And I finally signed up for the Chicago Triathlon, raced the race. It was Olympic distance triathlon. So a mile of swimming, 25-mile bikes, and a 6.2-mile run. And finishing that race was just this incredible moment for me because I had, achieved my goal, which was to finish the race. And the craziest thing was that there was still essentially one last huge surprise in store for me that day, which is I hadn't just finished the race, but I actually won the entire triathlon, placing first out of more than 4,000 other participants.
Holy moly.
On the day.
Wow.
Which was, like I said, completely unexpected. Never had raced triathlon before, coming off of this injury and everything like that.
How long was it again after? You said 18 months?
18 months, yeah. Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a wild day for sure. That's for sure. And something that definitely, really ultimately changed the entire trajectory of my life. The win itself, of course, is this, great, almost Hollywood ending to this story, cherry on top, whatever you want to call it. But more than anything, I remember that moment of finishing this triathlon, and it immediately in my mind went right back to that hospital room with my mom. It was going like, what would have happened in that moment? To go back to your first question, what was I thinking about when I was happening? What I was personally thinking about was darkness and negativity and giving up and letting go and my life being over. And thank God for my mother who came in and forced me to shift my mind towards that positive mindset. And so my mind just went back like, wow, like I was at this sliding door moment. I was so lucky to have somebody in my life who had the strength and determination to get me out of this negativity. And look how much has come out of this. And I don't think of myself as some superhuman person. Like, I think I'm just as human as everyone else, faults and warts and strengths and weaknesses and everything. And so it actually gave me not only excitement about myself and goals that I wanted to set for myself, but in a general sense for just humanity. It made me realize that as humans, I believe that we have so much potential lying just under the surface oftentimes. That, I'd say sometimes we have reservoirs of untapped potential. And my mother was able, through even this darkest moment in my life, to help me harness that and realize my potential in this sense. And that didn't end there. In fact, it almost was just the beginning for me, because it was like, wow, if I can achieve this despite these odds, what else can I go on to achieve in my life if I dedicate myself fully with passion? Because of course, as I said before, I set the audacious goal, but really I put in the daily work, from that first step in the chair to the 5 steps away to joining the whole 18-month process was a daily focus towards that goal. What can I do each single day to add just kind of one more drop to the bucket? And so, you know, like I said, I've had other audacious goals since then, and I've achieved some wonderful things. I've also had some failures along the way as well. But that learning was just so special for me of that process, and it's something that I'll always take with me, I think.
Wow. So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's just like, it's so inspiring, and it makes me think about, you know, where my edge is, you know, what that next step is for me, whether it's growing this podcast or, you know, growing any elements of my business and making a greater impact. So like that nice combination of the big macro goal, the possibility, like doesn't matter where you are today. If you dream big and take one step at a time, you can make it happen. And you're just such a beautiful example of that. And, you know, it's not only that, but, you know, you continuously raise the bar for yourself. Question I have for you is in like regards to the edge, that next thing to work on. How do you know what that is?
You know, I think that can be challenging. I think that, you know, one common expression or things that, you know, I hear from people is, that's all great, but what if I don't know what I'm passionate about? How do I find that? You know, you're defining that as the edge. I'm a big believer in, if that's the case, of course, it's really nice when you can set yourself this really tangible, measurable goal and go after it and know exactly what that might take, or at least try something. But I think that not moving forwards, sometimes if you think you're moving forwards, you're moving backwards, and that's totally fine, but at least trying something. Mm-hmm. So you might say, I'm not sure exactly what I'm passionate about right now, or I moved to a new city and I don't really know anybody here, and it's more easy for me to do this. Like, very quickly, again, it's a very human trait just to stay within our comfort zone. Yeah. And so my advice would
cozy,
be, right, you're
comfortable,
like, oh, well,
and familiar.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just say, if you don't feel like you're doing something that you're totally passionate about, it probably means you're sitting inside of your comfort zone, which is fine. Yeah. You're safe and you're you know, that. But I would say, sign up for something, join something, like any, I mean, we have so many resources, and whether that's online, in person, whatever, like just say yes to them. It could be random. Right. Like there's a circus coming through and there's a juggling class. I mean, literally, it could be the randomest thing in the world. It might totally not be your thing, but like, what's an hour of your day? If you're feeling like you're not living a life with passion, full of passion, like start trying stuff, start saying yes to stuff. You'll pretty quickly find some things you don't like, probably, but it's also knowing what you don't like helps you find what you do like.
100%. Totally agree with that. And usually any person who comes to me who is stuck or their vision isn't super clear, I'm always like, do something different. Change up your routine, have an opposites day, try new things, because that expands our perspective. When our perspective is expanded, we can see things that we don't currently see.
Absolutely.
Made me think about it. I was at this dinner last night, and it was a great dinner. And everybody got up and shared about a journey that they've been on in their life, and something they learned. And an elder who is there said that the most important 2 words for him is, so he says, authenticity and intention. And I think authenticity is pretty obvious, especially with everything we've been talking about in terms of living a life that's true for us, that's ultimately going to be fulfilling. But intention is really important as well, because with a clear intention, we can actually walk down a path in like the most straight possible way, versus if I don't know what my intention is, I'm essentially shooting darts in the dark.
Right.
And I don't really know where I'm going. And to me, that's been a really important lesson for me. I feel like with this podcast, I have a general goal. I want to inspire as many people as I possibly can, but that's not that clear. Yeah. So, you know, I know that the more clear, whether it's, you know, I want to impact a million people or, you know, 10 million people, then I can get really clear on that and then reverse engineer the actual action steps.
Exactly.
So I've had multiple people, like when I've thought my vision is clear, people are like, nope, that's not clear. So the reason why I'm sharing all this is, let's say someone wants, like, let's say you want to have a deeper relationship with your spouse. Right. Okay. You want to have a deeper relationship with your spouse. Okay. What does that mean? Does that mean, greater communication? Okay. The greater communication, what is that? Weekly check-ins or having the conversation that you haven't been willing to have with them yet? Yeah. What are those first steps to create that?
Yeah, no, I think that that's important. Of course, certain things are more measurable than others. Like you said, impacting 1 million people or raising X amount of dollars for my startup, or, something that's like really very tangibly measurable. Of course, when we get to oftentimes what I think are more important topics in life, which are, love and relationships, it's a little bit less, a little bit harder to measure, but I think that you did a great job right there of getting a little more granular. Like, I want to connect deeper. Okay, well, what does that look like? And what does that actually really look like? Or what day of the week are we going to do that on? Or putting that actual quote unquote next step on the calendar is, really, really positive. And it is nice to have a tangible step, even if, like I said, maybe it's a step in the wrong direction, but it's at least you're trying something. Going back to your question of how do you find that? If you said, I want to have better communication with your spouse, but then the sub question to yourself is, but I don't know how to do that. Okay, maybe you don't know.
Yeah.
But like, you could try, like, that whatever you're doing is not it now.
Right.
So like continuing to stay in your comfort zone is not it. So when you say change it up, try something different, it's like, great, I don't know, try a date night. Maybe that's not what's going to make you have better communication, but like that you tried that this week and then tomorrow you're going to try it, whatever that is. And like you could apply that to a million different examples, but it's that willingness to try and also be okay with being like, oh, that wasn't right, but I'm going to try again. Right. It's okay to try once and try again, try a third time, fourth time, fifth time, whatever.
I'm laughing because I've been practicing clear communication in terms of asking myself, what do I really want? And then actually communicating that. Like, believe it or not, that like a lot of times, like I've been talking to Taylor Conroy about this, who's been living with me. And he's like, people like ask me all the time, like, they're like, what should I do? And he's like, what do you want? Right. And they like say what they want. He's like, do that. You're like, believe it or not, it's so simple. Yeah. So it's like, if you want to have a, deeper, more connected relationship with your spouse, like, whatever that might look like to you, tell them that.
Yes. No, and I'm gonna take us on a slight tangent, but I think it's really relevant to this. Is, 3 years ago when I set myself the goal of setting these world records, I didn't have a background as a mountaineer. I had done some climbing, grew up in Portland, Oregon, but I had a background as a mountaineer. But I went into the world, to the universe, whatever you want to call it, and just said, I am going to try to set the world record for the Explorers Grand Slam. 99.9% of people in the climbing community know what that is, but like the average person on the street is like, well, what's that? And I explain it to them. Okay, great. That's what you're trying to do. Interestingly enough, tons of people, I needed to rally support around me, right? And so I actually, well, what do you want? What I need is support. I need to figure out how to market this thing. I need to figure out how to brand it. I have this huge charitable purpose around helping kids and kids' health. So I need to figure out the nonprofit space. There's a million things I needed to figure out.
A lot of moving parts, components.
But I was asking for something specific. Even though it was ridiculous in most people's mind, it was actually very narrow. It was around this very, very specific idea that I could explain what it was in a sentence or two. It's 2015 right now. On January 1st, on 2016, I'm going to be on a plane to fly into Antarctica to start this journey, which will last 4 months, to do X. And there's a whole million other questions. Well, why the heck would you want to do something like that? What, good does that do? How would some do that? But at least I was asking. And in the end, although I had, the great entrepreneurial struggle that, anyone with an idea has of trying to actually rally support and people getting around it, in the end, people came and helped me. But if I hadn't asked them specifically, I am doing this, can you help me? They wouldn't have even had the opportunity to say yes. Even though many of them said no, no one would have said yes. So to go back to your point about direct communication, it's like, it's very different to go around and be like, oh, I think I might try this thing. It's like an endurance thing, maybe some mountain. Like, no one knows how to help you with that. Yeah. Right? But if you say something like, I have this idea, I want to do this, and someone's like, great, I might not be the person, but what kind of help would you need? And you'd be like, oh, well, I could use someone who knows about social media. I could use somebody who knows about brand partnerships. I need someone who knows about, the nonprofit space and how to leverage great boots on the, right? Like, and all of a sudden you're having direct communication about a specific thing, and people can either opt in or opt out, but they at least have the option to opt in. That make, like,
Yes, that's gold. No, it's a great point. I'm just sitting here laughing because you actually trekked an additional mountain before you trekked this, the 7 continents and the 2 poles just by setting this whole thing up to begin with.
Oh yeah, in a lot of ways that was harder than the actual climbing of the mountains in a lot of ways. But
so wild. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question to that because I'm sure with these challenges, like they aren't things where it's just like they take 5 seconds. It's like a lot of days, a lot of prep work that goes into it. And I would imagine, since you are human, that there's probably a lot of times when you're like asking yourself, why the hell are you doing this, and wanting to give up. So I wanted to ask you, what are 3 things that you say or do to keep yourself going when you want to give up?
Yeah. The big one, I mentioned it earlier, but the big one for me is this too will change. That's a really sort of present mantra in my life. Because I think that it's also important to remember that when things are going really well, I probably gain the most value from it myself when things are going bad, because I'm like, oh, things are going bad. I don't like bad, so this too will change. But it makes me, because I almost feel like your question was about giving up. And I feel like if I keep trying, if I keep pushing forward, something else will happen. And I almost feel like if I give up, that's it. It actually won't change. Like, this too won't change. You will have always given up on this moment in time. That doesn't mean I haven't pivoted or shifted or changed directions a little bit, or, of course, all of those things. But, that's one thing I tell myself. This too will change. The other thing I'd ask is, what's the worst that could happen? That's a question that I ask myself. And I've been doing that since I was a little kid. But you ask yourself the question. I attribute a lot of giving up in the sense of sort of physical ways, because of what I'm doing is endurance sports, but also in the process of just trying to rally support, like I mentioned. What's the worst that can happen? And for me, because my biggest fear of going back is having regret or living a life that I'm not proud of or fulfilled by, when I ask myself the question, what's the worst that can happen? It almost always is keep trying, because the worst that could happen is to not try, to give up now would actually be the answer to your question. What's the worst that could happen? Well, I gave up and I didn't do that thing that I always really wanted to do. And so I ask myself that question a lot. And also when I'm afraid, of taking risks, and it's a little bit different when you're standing on the side of the mountain. Sometimes what's the worst that can happen is you could die, and you need to make smart decisions about staying alive. So not to use that example there, but what's the worst that could happen when you try something new, when you step out of your comfort zone? When it's like, worst that can happen is generally you fail, and like, great, I've learned some amazing things from my failures. So like, if that's the worst that could happen, like, I should probably try. So that would be number 2. So this too will change. What's the worst that can happen? What would a third thing be? I do try to sometimes slow myself down. I'm certainly far from the Buddha. I'm not like someone who can always just stay in the present moment, but I do, when things are really overwhelming and feeling like wanting to give up, wanting to quit, is that just kind of like, it's simple, but take a deep breath, breathe, take a beat, look around, like, kind of just catch your breath, that kind of collect yourself moment, which comes from, again, I'm not perfect at this, but having a general self-awareness of, oh my God, I'm scattered, I'm thinking about a million things, I'm this, my mindset's getting negative, whatever. Well, okay, let's take a deep breath here. And then I kind of cycle through, okay, have taken a deep breath. What's the worst that could happen? This too will change. And then it's going back to that, almost that chair example of like, okay, let's take one more step, and then let's evaluate it again from there. Sometimes that's a continual process. But, yeah.
Those all 3 excellent tips, and I love how you actually slowed down for the third one. Like, I don't know if that was like totally intentional, but it was super poignant. You really embodied exactly what you shared, so that was really awesome. So I have one more question before we get into the true challenge here, and I have this accountability program called Winning Weeks, and one of the things, like I know you mentioned at the start of this episode, the importance of checking in, that you're constantly checking in with yourself. My question for you is, what are those key ingredients for a winning week for you?
So for me, it might sound simple, but a part of my winning week is to not get caught up in the external of where I am at the expense of letting go of some of the basic self-care things. It's very easy to do, particularly when you're traveling, to eat a little worse, to stay out a little bit later, all of those things. We're all, Again, I don't always get it right, but that's part of a winning week for me. And then also to have, you mentioned, I think you mentioned at some point, a weekly cycle is interesting because I think that allows us a moment to check in, but actually saying the same way that we were talking about direct communication and asking for something specific, is to, at the beginning of the week, define what that week is. Mm-hmm. So again, my life is, at least at the moment, not steeped in the most routine. In fact, I don't get up and go to a 9 to 5 on Monday and the weekends and there's weekend, there's just a slightly different cadence to my life. But to go, what do I have on deck this week? And then define what that would look like for this week to be successful. Because that allows you at the end of that period of time to look back and say, what was a successful week? Actually, what did I get wrong? How can I do this better next week? And so for me, it sounds weird, but I don't run on Monday, it's the start of another week. It's this. But if I don't check in with myself on a Monday, let's just say 5, 10, 15 days slip by and I haven't had any metrics on the success. So it would be to, make sure my consistency happens no matter where I am, which has to do with my training and my food intake and sleep and all those things, self-care, no matter where I am. And the other thing is to send, again, tangible incremental goal steps. I mean, that's obviously a big part of what I believe in, but it's to say this week or this next 5 days, or right now I'm in LA for the next 4 days, for example, like what are the things that I want to accomplish by being here? And that doesn't, when I say accomplish, I don't mean by this hustle, this business opportunity, right? That's part of, the things I'm doing, but also what friends do I want to see? Where do I want to dive deep? Who do I really want to, we talked about community. What parts of my community do I want to foster in the moment that I'm here? All of those things, and checking in with that ahead of time so that before the week starts to unravel or the period of time starts to just, go, that I've had some clear expectations and intentions.
Beautifully said. So true in terms of the clarity, the intention, and then you have the barometer as to, did I live this week authentically in a way that, spending my time on the things that were most important to me.
Yeah.
And walking the talk. So beautiful. All right, Colin, it's time for the truth challenge.
Truth challenge. Let's do it, man.
So the way this is going to work is I've got 5 questions that I've come up with specifically for you, most of them just while we were having this conversation. You're going to have 30 seconds to answer each. Do you accept the challenge?
I accept the truth challenge. I'll do my best to be truthful.
Yeah, it's your job to answer them honestly, authentically, and bonus points for being vulnerable.
All right.
So, the truth challenge with the one and only Colin O'Brady. Question number 1 for you, sir. What is your relationship with death?
My relationship with death is, I think that I have a sort of an existential Camus type of thought on the world, which is sometimes I feel like, why are we here? Is this even real? Am I in a dream type of state? And oftentimes that actually fills me with anxiety. Although the things that fill me with anxiety, I try to find as strengths. All right, 30 seconds up. Last sentence I'll say is, I use death to inspire me to keep moving forward in life.
Question number 2 for you. What is your next Everest?
My next Everest is to inspire as many people as possible through my story, but also to I have some new athletic feats in 2018 along the same lines of using my feats to also draw attention to larger purpose. See, now I'm trying to fit into 30 seconds now, man.
Question number 3. This is our Giving Confessions question. We ask this to all of our guests. What is something that you're embarrassed to admit, maybe even ashamed to admit, or you just don't generally share, but you're willing to share anyways in the sake of being real because it could help someone else?
I don't have it all figured out. I don't. I'm asked to give advice, and I talk from my own anecdote of experience, but I often also have self-doubts and fears just like anybody else, and I think that that's really important to share, because sometimes I stand on stage and it seems like I have maybe all of the answers, and I don't have them all. I'm still searching for them.
Question number 4. What is something you could be more real about?
What is something I could be more real about? The struggle is real. Having ideas and not living within as hard as it can be to live within the constructs of life, trying to do something different is also very hard, because it's hard to find where you fit in.
And question number 5 for you is probably not the question that you're thinking I'm going to say, but what does your mom mean to you?
She's been an absolute light in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. Right now, she's very focused on being a grandmother. My sister has 2 new young children, and it's amazing to see her almost kind of not give up on me, but to be passing that on to a whole nother generation of life.
The one and only Colin O'Brady. Great job with the true challenge there. Is there anything you want to expand on any of your answers? You're so good at this, by the way.
Thank you.
Like, I've been asking you a lot of thought-provoking, hard questions. Your answers have been beautiful.
No, those are great questions, man. They're definitely ones that catch you off guard, make you think for a second. I could go on for more than 30 seconds, that's for sure. Particularly on death, we could go on a whole other tangent on that.
All right.
But it's good.
Cool. Well, as we wrap this show up, what can we do to support you?
So I'm very easy to find online. Check my Instagrams at Colin O'Brady, all the social platforms, just my name at Colin O'Brady with 1 L. And website for my nonprofit stuff is beyond72.com. Would love for you to check out my TED Talk that I gave this summer. That's called
So good.
Change Your Mindset and Achieve Anything. Would love to see that get to 1 million views. I think it's on 650,000 or something right now. So
you're gonna get there.
Few weeks, or a few months. So share that around if you feel so inspired. I would love that, or just check it out and have a look. And more than anything, I love it when people reach out. Like, drop me a note, whether that's DM on Instagram or whatever. I love to meet and interact with as many people as I possibly can. So to me, like I said, I'm mostly inspired by others. So I love the two-way dialogue. I'm not hard to reach out to. So reach out anytime, and would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Definitely check out that TEDx talk. So incredibly powerful, and share it out as well so more people can benefit from it.
Yeah.
What final words of wisdom, advice do you have for listeners of the one and only to live a bold, authentic dream life?
I'm going to distill it down into meandering topics that we've talked about, but it would be to distill down would be set an audacious goal. I know that people say those things, right? But really, like, think about that. Ask yourself, if I could do anything, if I could achieve anything, if I could be anywhere, like, where would that be? And then don't let your next question be, but I'm too old, or but I didn't start that yet, or but I don't know how to do that. Like, don't let the next word out of your mouth be when someone says, well, why aren't you doing that? I'm not doing that because this. Like, actually just be like, I'm setting this audacious goal, and I don't know how I'm going to get there, but the first little step is X, and I'm going to go do that tomorrow. And then figure out what you're going to do the next day. That's it. Simple as that. Take the big goal, set the incremental step.
The one and only Colin O'Brady. Little mic drop moment. I do have one more question. Can I ask you one more question?
Bonus round. Let's do it.
Okay. My extra question is, do you still trade the tofu for the Doritos?
I actually prefer the tofu now, to be perfectly honest. I love it when I eat the healthy food makes me feel good. So I've learned that over time. Although, the time or two, of course, I'll just in New York, grab a New York slice of pizza from time to time. I can't pass that up always. So, everything in moderation.
The one and only Colin O'Brady. Dude,